Peter Guest,
Yes, how you going?
thanks for joining us
No problem.
in a video for Hadfield's 50 years. You made your way down to Hadfield in 1978.
That's correct.
You were saying earlier you hadn't even heard of Hadfield
Well, I really
before.
didn't know the suburb of Hadfield. I mean, I knew Glenroy and Faulkner, but I knew Hadfield was somewhere in the northern suburbs, and I knew it was in the area. I was playing football at Brunswick at the time, and two chaps by the name of Bill Armstead, who was a legend, of the club, and John Mary, who was on the committee at the time. They come down to see me play. I remember the game they actually looked at. It was in a game against Port Melbourne. Anyway, I got a phone call the following week and said if you were interested in coming to play at Hadfield. This was just before the halfway through the season. So I said, oh yeah, and there was a little bit of coin involved, not a lot, but
What are we talking?
I was only about $50 a game.
$50 a game, it's good money in
Better-
78.
Well, it was better than what I was getting at Brunswick.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So that came into play a bit. Anyway, that started the lifelong association with the Hadfield Football Club. In that 78 period, well, that year we made the grand final. We played off against East Keilor. We got beaten in the grand final. But I do recall a lot of the guys who were playing then went on to play the next year in 1979.
Yeah, and that was the club's first ever senior premiership.
That was no.
No?
They had won the 71 grand final.
That's right.
When they first came into the competition under Max Payne. And 79, we had quite an influx of players from other competitions and other local sides. We had a coach by the name of Alan Dalton who'd been coaching at Brunswick. He was a good mate of mine. He came across and he was appointed coach. And we recruited some local players, as I said, plus we used a lot of the boys who played in 78. And a legend in Bernie Drebbing, of course, he was at his peak just about then. And we had some smart rovers in Marcus Leonard, an excellent local footballer, one of the best I could remember in my time, was Shane Duggan. And then we had some tough nuts playing across the back line in Mark Dugworth, Ricky Searle, Robbie Ray, just to name a few. So we were very strong in 79. We were able to get over the line. And,
Yeah, talk us a little bit about that.
It was a pretty competitive, as I said, we had a very strong team. And it took a while to gel because the players were coming from all over. But one thing we did know about our team, that we were fit, and we had some tough footballers who wouldn't take a backward step, and which proved to be our main weapon, I'd say, in the final series when we played against Aberfeldy and Strathmore. They were the two teams that we had to beat. We played Strathmore in the second semi-final. We won fairly well. They come out and we played them again in the grand final, and it was a tight game throughout the whole game. And I remember Alan Dalton, he was a playing coach. He busted up his shoulder halfway through the early first quarter, second quarter. So he had to come off, and we had to make some adjustments as we went along. And we sort of lost a bit of drive when he went off. He actually ended up coming back on and playing for a period of time, but it was no good. And then it's a tight game, and then we were able to get over the line in the last few seconds, or a couple of minutes of the game to win by a point or two.
What are a few of the memories, sort of that initial 5 minutes after such a close win to win a senior premiership?
Yeah.
Do they still live with them?
Yeah, they do, because I remember a lot of the supporters were excited. I remember one chap, one of our ex-players, didn't play in that grand final. I think he had actually been rubbed out. Peter Stewart. I remember him running around with us after the game at Windy Hill, just as excited as anybody else. So it was people like him, plus all our loyal supporters and committeemen who invested a lot of time and effort into recruiting a lot of those players that we played, and to be successful was a triumph for them, as well as, of course, with the players and the coaching staff.
Yeah, and
So we went up into A grade from there, and as luck turned out, or whatever was the situation, in those days they used to have a relegation system, and they still have. Bottom team in A grade went down to B grade, and winners of B grade went into A grade. For some reason I couldn't recall exactly, but that year they decided to change the A grade competition, and they made it into a 12-team competition, and both Hatfield and Strathmore went up into A grade. And as it turned out, first game of the year in A grade in 1980 at old Reddish Reserve, Hatfield played Strathmore in, it was a stand-up affair, knock them down, punch them in the head.
Well, it's funny to think now that Strathmore's a powerhouse in Premier Division and Hatfield's down in Whaley Division 2, but there is so much history that comes with those two teams back in the 70s.
Well, that's right.
Now, 1982, it's only your 5th year at the club, and you're appointed coach. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what happened there was that Alan Dalton had left, retired from coaching, and they appointed Mark Duckworth as coach, and didn't work out exactly how the committee wanted it to be. I'm not sure of the full circumstances, but they ended up putting him off, I suppose, for a better word.
Got the arse.
Something like that. Which was a scary thing in itself, because Mark was a tough hombre.
How old were you at the time?
I was probably
do the maths.
early 30s, I think, at the time, roughly. So took over halfway through that year, and coached in 82 and 83 and 84. Coached for 3.5 years. And we were in A grade. We hung around in A grade. We had a lot of young players coming through, and we had a lot of players who come from other clubs. Quite a few eccentric type of players.
Name a few.
Ken Don knew a few boys from Carlton, so he organised to get a few boys up here. Wayne Jacko Holt is his name. I think Peter Whittle might know him. You remember Peter? Yeah. He was a bit of a crazy boy, but he was a good value, and he was a pretty good footballer, really.
Now, in 1987, you went back for more punishment, this time as a playing president. I can't imagine the stresses that came with that responsibility.
That's right. We back in 85 and 86, lead Connon coaches in A grade. Unfortunately, got relegated at the end of 86. And the club was, in 87, we had lost a lot of players. A lot of our young blokes had left and gone to play in different leagues. And so we were certainly struggling a bit. And Ken Don and myself and a few others hunted around for an experienced coaching type people and someone to be on the committee as well. Ken had been a terrific servant of the club and as always was. He had been president for a bit and asked if I would take over, and he supported me, so I did. So in 87 we took over, Bernie was coach. We had a reasonable sort of year, but it was a bit of a struggle for the committee and also for Bernie as coach. So took over there, and then 88 continued on as, I didn't play in 87. In 88 I come out and decided to play and be president. And we had a successful year in B grade. There's B grade reserves that were good enough to win the flag.
So just let me interrupt you. 1988, you were playing reserves. You were a president. And you were also coaching the reserves at the same time as playing. So you had the trifecta.
Yes, I did. That was pretty hectic. But I had good support from senior above me, and Peter Whittle was senior coach, and all those sorts of people who were terrific to help out. And Roger Powell was there. He was
heard of him.
Yes.
And I've just heard a story before, also in 1988. This is unbelievable to think now. There was the seniors made the grand final. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
And the emergency for the senior grand final went out the piss the night before the grand final, and there was actually a late scratching on the day of the senior grand final.
Right,
and you came in for your only game of the year.
That's right.
In the 1988 senior grand final.
Yeah, it was. It was a pretty hectic week.
How was the?
I was a bit banged up, really.
And no mobile phones back around then. What was it? Just
pretty well banged up body-wise. So, but I had to go rush home, and people would listen to playing. I know you're right. So I had to rush home and find me tablets to kill the pain. So
Well,
anyway, I ended up playing. We played Paco in the grand final.
Yeah.
We had we had a good year in '88 in the first scene. We had very competitive. A bit unfortunate. Peter got rubbed out in a preliminary final, and I think, well, I'm not sure exactly what else happened, but we probably weren't at our full strength all over the ground. We had some reasonably young players playing, as I recall, and we were well beaten by Paco. We were very mature bodies, very skillful, and we just weren't up to the task that day.
Well, you weren't up for the task in '88, but it set the scene for what is one of the more famous premierships in the club's history, and it's the photo that's behind us and the flag. It's the 1989 premiership, and you had the honour of being president.
I was president of the
premiership
game,
side.
yeah.
So, did you know leading into that year? Did you get a vibe
Well,
from the group that you were?
I know that Peter was very, the coach was very positive about everything. Nearly all the boys who played in that grand final team were homegrown kids who come through the juniors. Probably the only one I don't think was maybe Jeff Bingham. It was
A ringing.
It was the only one I think it was a ringing, actually. He'd been in the Navy, or not the Navy, the Army, and he was looking for a game, and he just lobbed up.
Yeah. Got lucky.
Play. And he was a pretty good player.
Yeah.
So, but all the boys, that was one of the reasons that was so takes quite a place, I think, anyway, and because they were all young and they were all local, and they went on. Some of those boys went on to play heaps of games.
And we still see them around the club today, don't we? A lot of those guys. Yeah.
A lot of them played 300 plus, most of them.
Yeah.
And there were some characters in that team as well.
Tell us about a couple.
Well, the blokes that stood out to me was Joycey, which is all the boys would know Joycey, and Sully was another chap, a player. He was a bit of a character. They were good mates, but they
got up to some trouble. Yeah,
a bit of mischief.
Having played cricket with Sully, I could say that.
Yeah, he was a very good cricketer as well. But then we had the experienced guys in Bernie, who'd been around the club for whatever, many years.
Yeah.
And it was terrific. Then we had a lot of young guys as well, just in their early 20s.
Yeah.
So we were able to win the flag there and go into A grade.
Yeah.
And in 1990, and Peter left, I think. He did.
Yeah. Won a flag and left.
Yeah, I don't know. He went overseas somewhere.
Yeah.
Chasing Turkish people.
Yeah.
I don't know what it
happens to the best
he
of
was
us.
somewhere. Anyway, that's what happened.
From Premiership glory in '89, and probably one of the the greater premierships in the club history, as we touched on, to a few years later in 1992 was probably one of the tougher periods in the club's history. You were vice president at the time to Ken Don, who was sick around that time, and sadly, he passed away in that season of '92. So there was a big responsibility put on you to lead a club through such a difficult time when such a senior figure in the club who'd done so much work over a long period of time.
That's correct.
Sadly passed away too young.
Yeah, that was a very tremendous, turbulent time, really, in that period of time, with Marilyn and Ken passing within weeks of one another, and the club battled on, and we were able to get through that season. I just don't recall exactly where we finished as far as position on the ladders were concerned or anything of that nature, but we got through it and then pushed on into stayed in A grade up until from there till 1996.
And around that time you took on a chairman of selectors role.
Yeah, around there. Well, Alan Dolly, he came back, was reappointed as a coach for the 95-96 season, and with a couple of his mates. So I took over a position as a chairman of selectors over those couple of years, which again we were in A grade and fairly competitive, but we just weren't able to get over the line in a couple of games in '96. I think we lost just by the barest of margins.
Yeah.
But in those days, or any competition, you're in up in relegation, various margins can be staying up or going down. So unfortunately, I think we won 5 or 6 games
and still got relegated. Yeah, wow. Yeah. Well, and I guess it set a platform again for a grand final tilt the next year in '97 against our arch rivals Glenroy. Weren't able to get the job done there, but I'm sure there were...
Kenny Ingram come in as coach. Alan was put off.
Sacked again?
Sacked, I suppose.
Jeepers.
We had a few seconds on the way. But he was put off, and Ken was appointed coach, and they got into the '97 grand final, and they got beaten by Glenroy. So we languished a bit there in B grade, really, for all that time.
Yeah.
We weren't able to get up into A grade.
I don't think we've been there since. No, not in my lifetime, no.
I know that period of time there, Steve Gumley was coaching, that was early 90s.
Yeah.
After Harry Murray, I think. And we were a pretty good team in A grade when Steve was there. We actually had a lot of good players playing. Yeah. But it was such a competitive competition, as it is these days in A grade, as it compared to B grade and C grade.
Yeah.
But that was the history of what I know, I can recall.
Yeah.
And before that, as I said, in 1977, I think they played in the grand final. But there was a couple of blokes that stood out. I was just looking at Robbie Ray, who played in the '71 grand final team, also in the '79 grand final team. He was one person I was looking at the photo earlier last week. So he's a dual premiership player. And there was another chap there, I just can't recall who that was. I'm sure if he's listening, he'll know who he is.
And just life post Hadfield around the '90s, I know you're involved heavily with North Melbourne. You had a few players come and stay over the years and looked after them. And just tell us
about 3 years ago, we got involved with the North Melbourne Football Club, who we support as the host family. So we did that for just on 10 years, and that was quite an experience. The young boys coming from all parts of Australia, really, and hosting them and living with us for over a 12-month period.
Yeah.
And then you realise how hard it is at AFL football. When you're dealing with young kids who are 18, 17, 18 years old, they've just come out of boarding school or country or local footy or things like this. The demands are quite high, and that was probably up until about 3 years ago when we stopped. So I would say it's got even more intense than it is now.
Bit different from the old days when you guys you'd train on the Sunday, wouldn't you? You'd go to piss and train on the Sunday after a Sunday.
We'd run around and have a beer on Sunday and watch the Sunday afternoon footy. Yeah. That was recovery. So yeah, that was an eye opener for us, and understanding how not just the AFL football players involved in the system, but also a lot of the younger folk these days who.
A bit different,
aren't they? A bit different.
Don't worry, I know all about it, being a teacher. Well, Pete, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
President, chairman of selectors, assistant coach or coaching the reserves, coaching the seniors. You've done it all. You're a legend at Hadfield. It's been great to talk to you.
Can I just quickly say that when I first came here, there were some great people involved.
Yep.
And I mentioned Ken and Billy Armstead, but there was a lot of family connections from a lot of those people, the Walkers, the Singles, the ones that stood out to my mind anyway, and my wife, Suze, became friends with those people as well. Plus a lot of the footballers that we played with, we still have some contact with them, not as much as we should, but they were terrific people, and they're probably the ones that set the club up, even though they're past. Their memory still lives with me, and a lot of the blokes who were involved in that time.
No doubt. And any last words for anyone thinking of coming to the 50-year ball on July 10?
Please come along and celebrate, catch up, relive the old memories of what happened back when you played and when I played, and enjoy yourselves. That's the main thing.
It's been a pleasure, Pete.
Thank you.
Thank you.